On the night of December 30, 2000, someone climbed into a family's home in Tokyo and murdered all 4 people inside. A husband, a wife, their 8-year-old daughter, their 6-year-old son. And if that was all this case was, it would already be one of the most horrifying unsolved mysteries in modern Japan. But that is not all this case is. Because after the killings, the murderer did not run. He did not panic. He did not vanish into the night as fast as he could. According to investigators, he stayed in the house for hours. He ate the food from the family's kitchen, he used their bathroom, he treated his own injuries with their first aid supplies. He used the family computer, and then, somehow, despite leaving behind an extraordinary amount of evidence, he disappeared without ever being identified. This is what makes this case feel different. Not just violent, not just tragic, but deeply wrong in a way that gets under your skin. Because most killers want distance from what they have done. This one behaved, at least for a while, like he had nowhere else to be. This is the story of the Miyazawa family and the killer who stayed for breakfast. The victims were Mikio Miyazawa, his wife Yasuko, and their daughter Nina and son Rei. Public case summaries identify the murders as having taken place in Setagaya, Tokyo on the night of December 30, 2000 into the early hours of December 31st. The family lived in a house in Kamiso Shigaya near a park in a neighborhood that by then had changed significantly because many of the surrounding homes had already been demolished for park expansion, leaving the Miyazawa house more isolated than it once had been. That setting matters because isolation changes everything. A house that once sat among neighbors begins to feel exposed in a different way when the homes around it disappear. Fewer people nearby, less ordinary activity, more darkness, more silence. And in this case, silence turned to be one of the killer's greatest allies. The Setagaya murders have remained unsolved for nearly 25 years, despite one of the largest investigations in Japanese criminal history. The Metropolitan Police Department has publicly continued appeals for information and maintains a reward. Police have released details about the suspect's clothing, DNA profile, items left in the home, and the probable sequence of events, all of which deepen the mystery. And that is why this case has such a grip on people. Because it is not a story with no evidence. It is a story with too much evidence and still no answer. Before this became a mystery, it was a home. Mikio Miyazawa was the father, Yasuko was the mother, their daughter Nina was 8 years old, and their son Rei was 6. Public reporting consistently presents them as an ordinary family living an ordinary life in Tokyo at the end of the year 2000. And I always think that matters in cases like this, because when a case becomes internationally known, the victims can get flattened into the family. But this is not just a category. It was a father in his own house, a mother in her own house, and 2 children in their house. Their last night should have been unremarkable. The end of the year, The kind of night nobody remembers because nothing unusual is supposed to happen. Instead, that home would become one of the most intensely analyzed crimes in Japan. The Miyazawa home set near Setagaya Park. By the end of the year 2000, many of the neighboring houses had already been torn down due to the park project, leaving fewer occupied homes nearby. This detail appears in many summaries of the case because investigators and observers have long considered it relevant to how the crime unfolded and how the killer may have chosen the house. That fact gives the whole story a strange atmosphere. Not remote exactly, not some farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, but isolated enough that the killer may have felt he had time. Time to enter, time to kill, time to remain. And time is the key word in this case, because this is not only a story about murder, it is a story about what happened afterward, minute by minute, inside a house that should have been empty except for the dead. Investigators concluded that the killer most likely entered through the second floor bathroom window at the rear of the house after removing the insect screen. Police have publicly described this as the probable entry point. Just picture that for a second. A man outside a house late at night, not knocking, not forcing the front door, climbing, removing the screen, slipping into the second floor. It is such an intimate, invasive way to enter someone else's life. No warning, no negotiation. Just a body crossing the boundary between outside and home. Police have long believed the murders occurred sometime between the late evening on December 30 and the early hours of December 31. Public case summaries often place the attack at around 11:30 p.m., based in part on the witness observations and the family computer timeline. What investigators believe happened next is brutal and fast. Public case summaries say that Ray, the younger child, was strangled first. Mikio then confronted the intruder and was attacked. Police have stated that a knife from the house was used in part of the attack and that the blade broke during the violence. A second knife was then used to continue the murders. 3 of the victims died from stab wounds, while Ray died by strangulation. That sequence is horrifying in a very particular way because it suggests movement through the house. Not one sudden event in one room, but a progression, an intrusion turning into a confrontation turning into a slaughter, and the family, one by one, being consumed by the same nightmare. I want to be careful here because cases involving children can easily become sensationalized if told the wrong way. The important thing is not graphic detail for its own sake. The important thing is what the crime tells us about the killer. And what it tells us is this: whoever entered the home was capable not only of extreme violence, but of continuing after the first act of violence did not end the scene. This was not a single blow and panic. This was sustained. The next morning, Yasuko's mother came to the home after being unable to contact the family and found the bodies. That moment is easy to skip past because people tend to focus on the killer, but the human reality of this case includes the awful discovery. A mother entering the house, expecting silence, maybe sleep, maybe some small family inconvenience, and instead walking into complete destruction of a family. Cases like this never belong only to the dead. They radiate outward into the first person who sees the scene, into the detectives who process it, into the relatives who spend years waiting for an arrest that never comes, and into the public who cannot stop thinking about the fact that the killer stayed inside. And now we get to the part of the story that makes it unforgettable. According to investigators, after murdering the family, the killer remained inside the Miyazawa house for hours. Police say he used the toilet, consumed food and drinks, used the first aid materials to treat his own injuries, and accessed the family computer. The computer was connected to the internet the morning after the murders, helping establish that someone remained in the house after the killings. This is the detail that changes the emotional temperature of the entire case. Because murder is one kind of horror, comfort after the murder is another. The killer did not act like a man desperate to get out. He acted, at least in some ways, like a person settling in, eating, cleaning himself up, using the bathroom, touching objects, using the internet, moving through rooms after 4 people were already dead. This is not just violence. This is a kind of possession. And that is why the title of this case, at least in the way many people remember it, always come back to the same awful idea. The killer stayed. He stayed long enough that investigators could reconstruct not only what he did to the family, but what he did afterward. Here is what makes the Setagaya murders especially frustrating from an investigative standpoint. The killer left behind a lot. Police recovered fingerprints, blood, feces, clothing, personal effects, and a hip bag. Police reporting and police material say he left behind items including a sweater, a scarf, gloves, a handkerchief, and other belongings. DNA from the suspect was recovered, and analysts suggested he was a male and had mixed ancestry. Described in public summaries as having maternal roots connected to Southern Europe or the Mediterranean region, and paternal roots from East Asia. That sounds like the kind of case that should be solved. A suspect who bleeds in the house, uses the bathroom in the house, leaves clothing in the house, and touches things. And yet, here we are, almost a quarter century later, still saying, the suspect. There is something maddening about that, because usually in true crimes, lack of evidence explains a lack of resolution. Here, evidence and resolution seem to have split apart. The crime scene offered investigators an unusual abundance of clues, but no clue strong enough to close around one identifiable man. Police have released many details about the suspect's clothes and possessions. Public police materials describe the clothing left behind as mass-market items, including garments traced to specific regions and brands. Investigators have also publicly described the suspect as being young, with some estimates around late teens to 20s at the time of the murders. And this is where the case starts to feel like almost taunting, because you can build an outline of the man, his size, his clothing, his blood, possible ancestry, even his likely injuries from the attack, but still not his name. It is like the killer left investigators a silhouette instead of a face, and for years, that silhouette has been studied from every angle. One of the eeriest parts of the case is the family computer. Public summaries say the killer accessed it after the murders, and investigators use that internet activity to help estimate how long he remained in the house. That is such an unsettling detail because it feels weirdly modern and weirdly casual at the same time. A killer does not just flee or hide, he logs on inside the home of the people he had just killed. There is something almost obscene about how normal that action is. Using a computer, clicking around, interacting with a machine while the bodies are elsewhere in the same house. It makes the killer feel calm in a way that is difficult to process. Police also concluded the suspect used the family toilet and treated his own injuries using supplies from the home. Those details were released publicly and become some of the most infamous facts in the case. Again, it is not just that he stayed, it is how he stayed. He acted like a man managing inconvenience, a wound, bathroom, hunger, as if the greatest problem in the house for him was practical. That level of composure after a quadruple murder has led many observers to speculate about the killer's psychology. But whatever label anyone wants to place on him, the publicly known behavior points to someone who did not experience the house as a place of immediate danger. And that may mean one of two things. Either he was extraordinarily calm after the killings, or he felt very confident no one was coming soon. One major theory is that the Miyazawa family were victims of a stranger who selected the house because of its relative isolation and accessibility. The probable window entry, the partially isolated setting, and the killer's apparent freedom of movement inside all make this theory plausible. Public police materials do not identify a known relationship between the suspect and the family. Under this theory, the family may have been chosen not because of who they were personally, but because their house offered an opportunity. The idea is terrifying for an obvious reason, because it means there may have been nothing uniquely personal about the selection, just layout, timing, access, and terrible luck. Another theory is that the killer knew the neighborhood well, or at least knew enough about the house and the surroundings to feel confident entering and lingering there. Because the area has changed due to redevelopment, some have speculated that someone familiar with the local geography might have understood just how exposed and yet how quiet the house had become. That theory is compelling because of the staying. A stranger might get in and out, but a person who remains for hours after 4 murders may have felt not merely bold, but informed. Public suspect descriptions have often suggested the killer was relatively young, possibly in his late teens. That conclusion comes from police analysis of physical evidence and clothing. If that estimate is right, it adds another disturbing layer. Because then this was not the work of some aging crazy man who had spent decades perfecting himself. It may have been someone shockingly young, yet already capable of extraordinary violence and composure. And that possibility is hard to sit with. A young man climbing into a house, killing a family, then calmly tending to his own needs before leaving. It sounds less like rage and more like intrusion as a form of patrol. And then there's the most unsettling theory of all, that the real motive is unclear because the crime did not fit neatly into the categories people expect. That uncertainty leaves a vacuum, and vacuums in true crime are dangerous because they tempt people to fill them with stories. But the honest answer here is narrow and colder. We know a lot about what the killer did. We do not know enough about why. The investigation into the Setagaya murders has been enormous. Public reporting says Japanese police have pursued thousands of these and continued annual public appeals for information. The Metropolitan Police Department maintains a dedicated case page and reward information. That is another reason this case remains so compelling. It is not unsolved because nobody cared. It is unsolved despite intense attention, strong forensic work, and public pressure, which somehow make it worse. Because it means the usual comfort people cling to, surely this case gets solved once enough evidence appears, does not hold. It would be easy in a case like this to spend all our time on the killer, the DNA, clothing, toilet, computer, the breakfast, but the center of the story is still the family: Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei. 4 people whose finer hours were transformed into evidence for someone else's mystery. That is part of what makes this case so emotionally difficult, because the killer left so much of himself behind, and still took the most important thing with him, an explanation. The Setagaya family's murder remain unsolved. Tokyo police continue to seek information, and the case remains one of Japan's most notorious unsolved crimes. Public police materials continue to present evidence, details, and reward information in hope that someone will identify the suspect. That means somewhere in this story, unless the killer is dead, there is still a living person who knows exactly what happened in that house. He knows how he got in, knows why he stayed, and knows what the family's last moments were. And he knows why all of that evidence still somehow points everywhere except to his name. Sometimes the case that finally breaks is not the one with the least evidence. It is the one where one person finally recognizes a detail that has been public for years. A piece of clothing, a physical habit, a man who came home injured. A person who knew too much about a crime scene they should have never known that well. These are possibilities, not proven misleads, but they are exactly the kinds of thing cases like this live on. There are some cases that stay with people because of how savage they are, some because of how strange they are, and some because they violate the basic rhythm of what a murder usually looks like. This is one of those cases, because the killer did not just take a family's life. He took their home. and for a few hours he acted like it belonged to him. A father, a mother, a daughter, a son, dead inside the walls that should have protected them. And somewhere between the bathroom window and the breakfast food, the murderer turned one family's house into one of the most haunting crime scenes in modern history. And maybe that is the line that stays with the case more than any other. He did not just kill them, he stayed.